I know you can send Sheriff Jones after me to bring me back, but if you do I will tell everything. You might think I'd change my mind because I am just a kid, but I won't. Without Sean I don't care about nothing. I love you Papa even if I don't know why, since everything we did has brought me misery. Your loving son, Henry Hank James. I drove back to the farm in a daze. I think some people waved to me, I think even Sally Cottery, who was minding the Cottery's roadside vegetable stand, waved to me, and I probably waved back, but I've no memory of doing so. For the first time since Sheriff Jones had come out to the farm, asking his cheerful, no answers needed questions and looking at everything with his cold inquisitive eyes, the electric chair seemed like a real possibility to me, so real I could almost feel the buckles on my skin as the leather straps were tightened on my wrists and above my elbows. He would be caught whether I kept my mouth shut or not. That seemed inevitable to me. He had no money, not even 6 bits to fill the truck's gas tank, so he'd be walking long before he even got to Elkhorn. If he managed to steal some gas, he'd be caught when he approached the place where she was now living, Henry assumed as a prisoner. It had never crossed his unfinished mind that she might be a willing guest. Surely Harlan had given the person in charge, Sister Camilla, Henry's description. Even if he hadn't considered the possibility of the outraged swain making an appearance at the sight of his ladylove's durance vile, Sister Camilla would have. In her business, she had surely dealt with outraged swains before. My only hope was that, once accosted by the authorities, Henry would keep silent long enough to realize that he'd been snared by his own foolishly romantic notions rather than by my interference. Hoping for a teenage boy to come to his senses is like betting on a long shot at the horse track, but what else did I have? As I drove into the dooryard, a wild thought crossed my mind: leave the tea running, pack a bag, and take off for Colorado. The idea lived for no more than 2 seconds. I had money, $75, in fact, but the tea would die long before I crossed the state line at Julesburg. And that wasn't the important thing. If it had been, I could always have driven as far as Lincoln and then traded the tea and 60 of my dollars for a reliable car. No, it was the place. The home place. My home place. I had murdered my wife to keep it, and I wasn't going to leave it now because my foolish and immature accomplice had gotten it into his head to take off on a romantic quest. If I left the farm, it wouldn't be for Colorado, it would be for state prison. And I would be taken there in chains. That was Monday. There was no word on Tuesday or Wednesday. Sheriff Jones didn't come to tell me Henry had been picked up hitchhiking on the Lincoln-Omaha highway, and Harold Cottery didn't come to tell me, with puritanical satisfaction, no doubt, that the Omaha police had arrested Henry at Sister Camilla's request, and he was currently sitting in the pokey, telling wild tales about knives and wells and burlap bags. All was quiet on the farm. I worked in the garden harvesting pantry vegetables, I mended fence, I milked the cows, I fed the chickens, and I did it all in a daze. Part of me, and not a small part, either, believed that all of this was a long and terribly complex dream from which I would awake with Arlette snoring beside me and the sound of Henry chopping wood for the morning fire. Then, on Thursday, Mrs. Macready, the dear and portly widow who taught academic subjects at Hemmingford School, came by in her own Model T to ask me if Henry was all right. There's an intestinal distress going around, she said. I wondered if he caught it. He left very suddenly. He's distressed all right, I said, but it's a love bug instead of a stomach bug. He's run off, Mrs. Macready. Unexpected tears, stinging and hot, rose in my eyes. I took the handkerchief from the pocket on the front of my biballs, but some of them ran down my cheeks before I could wipe them away. When my vision was clear again, I saw that Mrs. Macready, who meant well by every child, even the difficult ones, was near tears herself. She must have known all along what kind of bug Henry was suffering from. He'll be back, Mr. James. Don't you fear. I've seen this before, and I expect to see it a time or two again before I retire, although that time's not so far away as it once was. She lowered her voice, as if she feared George the rooster or one of his feathered harem might be a spy. The one you want to watch out for is her father. He's a hard and unbending man. Not a bad man, but hard. I know, I said. And I suppose you know where his daughter is now. She lowered her eyes. It was answer enough. Thank you for coming out, Mrs. Macready. Can I ask you to keep this to yourself? Of course. But the children are already whispering. Yes. They would be. Are you on the exchange, Mr. James?